All right, welcome back to the Bullpen podcast, where we spotlight local business leaders driving real impact in their communities. Today, we're joined by Lacey Olson, owner and chief manager of Transport Express, a Minnesota-based logistics company known for fast, flexible, high-touch freight solutions. Over the past decade, Lacey has built a portfolio of businesses across concrete, real estate, and transportation, all while embracing the mindset of a true entrepreneur. In this episode, we dig into how she leads, adapts, and scales across multiple ventures and what it really takes to run a service-driven logistics company in a fast-moving industry. Lacey, thanks for joining us today.
Hey, I'm happy to be here, Andrew. Thank you for having me.
Transport Express prides itself on one point of contact from start to finish. Why is streamlined communication such a differentiator in logistics, and how do you execute that internally?
Well, I can't take full credit for it, Andrew. It is actually what we inherited when my business partners and I acquired the business in 2021. We call it the cradle to grave model, or an A to Z broker. And that is what the previous owner had set these people up to do. Said, this is your business, you own it, you run it. And I will say that one of the best parts of that is, given the current condition of our industry, where fraud is rampant, very much spurred by AI and it being used by hackers, it's no longer the 13-year-old in the basement that you're worried about. They've got bots running all the time in the background. And that single point of contact and the streamlining of our communications with our shippers and the carriers that we utilize to fulfill their requirements is one of our biggest strengths in protecting the freight that we're moving. Our brokers know what's going on at all times with their loads because they own it. They own every piece. There aren't any handoffs. If there's some support in the background, I'm watching them talk to each other across the aisle, from one desk to another, like, hey, did you get this? And they're like, yep, this is what's going on. And for us, it's, partly we're seeing that protecting us from fraud at this point. But the other thing is, I don't know about you, Andrew, but I like to know that I have one number to call. When somebody is offering me a service, I bank with who I bank with because all I got to do is call Bob. And Bob will either fix the problem or get me directly to the person. And so for us, we're not going to be the biggest. And honestly, we're probably not going to be the cheapest. Well, I know we're not going to be the cheapest, but what we are going to be is the best communicators. And you can feel the most secure knowing that when you hand this load to Tommy to take care of, Tommy is the one taking care of it. And I think that has been a huge differentiator for us as this industry of transportation intermediary has evolved over the years.
Kind of along those lines, high-touch freight demands speed, precision, and constant attention to detail. What processes or routines help you maintain consistency across complex shipments?
That's a really good question. We are currently in the middle of diving down into our brokers' processes. Like I said, these people were told, this is yours, build it and do it the way that you want to do it within these parameters. So I know some of them, they wake up and the first thing they do is they track and trace. They want to make sure that everything's where it's supposed to be. They're doing their reach out calls. All of them sort of have their own process. So that's a little bit of a hard question for me to answer. There are, key components. They try to use the same carriers that they've established relationships with in the past. They really get to know their shippers. And one of my guys, he's like, when I go to so-and-so's, I'm not wearing Transport Express's hat. I'm wearing their hat. I am their transportation supervisor. I find it, when we're looking for people in this business and we've considered hiring, what I'm actually looking for is entrepreneurs. I want people that want to run their own business and that understand how to build systems and processes in order to make that work. And like I said, right now we're diving in because we want to understand, because we want to scale and we want to replicate what our people have been doing. The people on my team, they've been, some of these people have been doing this for longer than I've been working. And you just have to have so much respect for them and their experience because they've done it. They've tried it. They've done different things. Sometimes they are pretty resistant to the stuff that we bring to the table. Where I'm like, I'm just trying to make your life a little bit easier. And they're like, nope, this is the way I've always done it. And this is the way that it works. And you know what? If it works, okay. As long as it's within the parameters that we've set from a safety and compliance standpoint, build your process. And, when I see how well it works, I want to know more.
Yeah. If it's not broke, don't fix it, right?
Correct. I
Taking
did
over a
not come
30
here to overhaul the whole company.
Taking over a 30-year-old company is no small feat. What were the biggest surprises, good or bad, when you stepped into the driver's seat at Transport Express?
Oh my gosh. Over the last 4 years, I've gotten really comfortable being the person who knows the least in the room. Right. And I knew that walking into the business conceptually, but actually living it as someone who's typically the top student. I'm very driven. I am the leader, just sort of roles that I have, you know, built for myself over time. The humility that actually creates the buy in with your people has been one of my favorite lessons that I've learned, like seeing that actually work, being the first one to be like, hey, can you tell me what that acronym means? I don't know. And that fear that I think a lot of us as leaders have, that if we don't have all the answers, people aren't going to trust us and they're not going to want us to lead them. And I've found the opposite to be true. It's taken time, but I do think over those 4 years, just coming in and saying, I don't know, actually. I need you to tell me what you do know, and then I will apply like my 30,000-foot view here. Um, the other thing is that this idea of being a travel agent for freight, which is sort of how it was explained to me when we were looking at the business, was a major oversimplification. And then the impact, too, that our drivers have, our carriers have, like the backbone of our country is our transportation industry. And I
Mhm.
completely took it for granted before stepping into this seat. You think about anything that you have, somebody somewhere has driven that to get it to the point where you can buy that, whether it's from Target or, Amazon, like their distribution centers, all of those layers that go into the convenience that we have just as humans here in America. That has been majorly eye-opening. And then even a little bit deeper, I recently went to Washington, D.C. and participated in our annual fly-in for the industry, and where we went and we lobbied on Capitol Hill and we had conversations with our representatives and we said, hey, this matters to us, but this is why it matters to your constituents. And learning to apply, the things that I've been learning over the last 4 years, and seeing how it impacts my neighbors, my children, everybody, has been. I love when I learn more, and when the world gets bigger, it just helps me keep things in better perspective. When I'm not staring at my belly button and I'm only worried about my bottom line, um, it's a much more expansive way of approaching life. And I'm just really grateful for that learning over the last 4 years.
Yeah, for sure. Entrepreneurship often involves wearing many different hats. How do you decide what to own yourself versus what to delegate?
Well, kind of going back to the fact that I'm the person that's the least experienced in this industry, in this company. It's been very easy to be like, I can't because I don't know how, um, which is good because I am I'm learning, I'm unlearning um, the idea that I'll just do it. Right. Because most of the places in my life, I'm very capable. And honestly, I'll just do it. I'll just do it. It's easier than explaining it to you. Um, and so for me, I was forced to not take a hands on approach here just by nature of not knowing how. Um, and what I've seen in that is that it creates space for my people to actually step up and to realize kind of the next level for themselves and empowering them. When we started, we had a woman and she was the accountant. Like she was like the bookkeeper, and over the last 4 years, she's grown. And now her title is accounting and HR manager. And she has people under her and she is leading people and she is driving initiatives. And the woman that 4 years ago we met, that wasn't what she was doing. And when we kind of got out of her way and we just sort of steered her in the direction, she has just blown us away. And, similarly speaking with our general manager too, like when we get out of their way and we say, hey, here's our overarching goal. This is the direction we want to go, but you fill in the blank. It creates space for other people to grow and to become a greater version of who they are. And that to me is actually something that matters. I was a psychology major. My plan was to go into family and marriage counseling. I love helping people. I love helping people discover who they are. I love seeing people achieve their potential. And as an entrepreneur, I get to do that in a completely different way that's energizing, to me, and really rewarding.
I love that. The logistics industry has been through major shifts in recent years. What
Mhm.
changes have impacted you guys the most, and how are you adapting?
um, oh gosh. So we bought sort of at the tail end of the 2020 like peak, right? You think of the housing bubble that popped in, 2008. That's kind of we came in at like the top point of that from the transportation industry because think of 2020, nobody was going anywhere. I mean, and drivers were essential and people had to get toilet paper. I don't know if you remember that fun stuff.
Oh, yeah.
Um, but, so then they're charging more, which in turn is, more that we charge our shippers, right, to cover the cost of, the services. So we have been on, the part of the roller coaster where you're like going down and you're screaming, and it's fun, and your stomach is like, ah. I feel like that's what we've been doing for about the last 3 years. And that is all very much a product of re-regulating after the inflammatory situation that was 2020. So that's been a huge effect. We've been part of kind of the re-regulating of, the industry and the market and the pricing. And that's come at a cost from the top line revenue standpoint, which is scary when you invest in something and you think you're gonna be bringing in, X and you end up bringing in B. Um, it's a little unnerving, but, between that and then, like I said earlier, the fraud, like the AI and what that is equipping people to do on the dark web and, I sat in on a panel, at a recent conference, and I was like I raised my hand, and I was like, "So you're telling me we're screwed?" And he's like, "No, you just need to not be the low-hanging fruit, right? Like, this is never going away." So we've seen major technological advancements within this industry. This used to be a very relationship, trust-based, and paperwork-heavy industry. And that is shifting because, with better technology, there is more opportunity to streamline and automate things. So even though the AI bot, hacker thing is kind of scary and the fraud is real, um, actually the opportunities that it's creating for people to get out there and do the stuff that they're really good at. So like my brokers, right? You want them doing the sales side facing, you want the revenue generating activities as much as possible. And so, with the new advancements that are happening out there and the technology that's being created to reduce that mundane, kind of brainless, like data entry parts of it, it's been really neat seeing how that has released and unlocked the potential and like made things less limited in
Huh.
what people are able to go and achieve on their own. We've got, so if you think about you got a broker who brings in, let's say, $400,000 in gross margin a year. That's pretty good, right? But if he had to do all of the paperwork for every single one of those loads, he would probably be capped out at like 200 to 250,000 just from a time perspective. And so that's been really interesting to see. Like I said, I'm starting to lean in a little bit more on the political side of things, just, legislatively, what's been going on, what should be going on, what we would like it to look like. And again, coming from that very relationship, trust based, my word is my bond kind of a mentality to unfortunately living in a world where we do need some more regulations and we do need definitions of what a safe carrier is, right?
Um,
Because anybody can really go out there and get a CDL. And unfortunately, that's kind of what we're seeing right now is there are people out there driving truck that really are not equipped to drive a truck. I probably wouldn't even let them drive, a minivan given the amount of training that they've had and, being able to be part of the voices that are crying out and saying, "Hey, we need this defined and we need more regulation," which is not a thing I thought I'd ever ask for. I don't always want the government telling me what to do. Okay, I rarely do, let's be honest. But there are times that that is necessary, and that's also something that's going on here is that we are advocating for the safety of every single person that's on the road driving.
Yeah.
because that's what it comes down to. I mean, you can't drive down the road and not see a semi, right?
Can I share something?
You sure
Just
can.
just this morning, this is kind of ironic. I'm at a stoplight and I look over and there's a delivery truck next to me. And on his dashboard, he had a phone mount. Um, and I could see it clear as day. He was playing a movie.
Oh my
Um,
gosh.
so, and he had a large truck. And so there he is driving down the road, doing his thing, but
That's terrifying.
simultaneously watching a movie. I was shocked. I
Well,
could,
I mean, and that's the stuff, right?
yeah, it's unbelievable.
I mean, let's be I mean, I don't always make the best choices with my phone in the car, right? I
None of us
mean,
do. None of us
none of
do.
us do.
But
We
when you're
don't.
operating that type of a machine,
I mean,
number one,
that's
you're
a
getting
weapon.
paid. Number two, I mean, that is a large vehicle on the road. You need to be more responsible than that.
Mhm. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, just we're learning that, right? Cell phones weren't a thing 30 years ago. That
Right.
wasn't, it wasn't an option for our drivers. I think the biggest concern was people not resting enough and, popping caffeine pills or, other things. My uncle was a driver. He definitely had some habits to, make the best money, right? And we've seen that over time kind of evolving in the industry as new things come up that create, risks. That's when, the FMCSA steps in and says, like, okay, no, you have to, you can only drive so many hours and then you have to brake for so many hours because when you're tired, you're more dangerous than if you were drunk, kind of a
Yeah.
deal.
Yeah.
So, yeah, those are just a few things that I've been seeing in the industry that have been shifting.
Yeah. Makes sense. Across your businesses, what have you learned about building teams that are proactive, reliable, and aligned with your expectations?
One of the things I've learned is that one, I have to be really clear in what my expectations are. One of my favorite things to say, and I can't take credit for it, is clear is kind. I think sometimes we're afraid to tell people when they don't meet expectations, or sometimes we're even afraid to voice what our expectations are because we don't want to offend anybody. We don't want to make them feel bad if that isn't something that they would do. And so for me, the number one thing is getting really clear myself in what the direction is, and then making sure that it's clearly communicated with my team. But then again, kind of going back to getting out of their way. Just because I would go A, B, C, D, E, F, G doesn't mean that going A, C, D, B, F, G is wrong. As long as we get from the point that we are to the point that we want to get to, let's let people be creative, like put guardrails up, but it doesn't have to be a rigid, this is the only way.
Mm.
Obviously, sometimes there's processes where it has to be that, Andrew, but for the most part, leading these people is about, one, being clear. I think two, setting an example, right? And that, you know, that can look different based on what you're trying to, lead them to. Obviously, I'm not setting an example by getting out there and slinging freight and showing them how to like get the customers and all of that. But I am an example in, okay, when something goes wrong or we, have a crisis that we're dealing with, how do I respond? Do I
Mhm.
start screaming and crying that the sky is falling, or do we take a deep breath, a step back, and, do the immediate triage kind of a deal and then move forward? And also, one of my biggest things too is another cliche saying, but we win or we learn. Um, Winning is really fun and it feels good. But we actually learn more when we make mistakes. I was just reading about this idea that neurologically speaking, even like our children, right? When we model, hey, I messed this up, but this is how I went about adjusting my behavior or how I fixed the situation. Being really vulnerable and honest in that regard goes much, much further than being like, just do what I do. I got this. Perfection and presenting this idea that you've got it handled actually undermines everybody's confidence that is looking up to you. I am almost uncomfortably honest at times with my people about what's going on and the realness of it. And I think that goes a long way to the team that I have here and how they collaborate, how proactive they are. I mean, honestly, I wasn't really even in the office the last 2 weeks. I had two conferences. I traveled, then, kids and sickness. It's that time of year, and everybody handled it just fine. My people know what they're doing. I don't have to be here every day, and that is when I feel like I've won as a leader.
Yeah, no kidding. You've helped start, acquire, and scale multiple companies. How do you evaluate whether a new venture is worth pursuing?
That one I don't feel like I can actually give you anything really good on, Andrew. I like to joke that I was just delusional enough that I I like my ability to figure things out, right? Like I'm overly optimistic about that. So when it comes down to assessing businesses and acquisitions, I'm really a novice. I really feel very fortunate and lucky that we got what we got here with this business. And there were things that we got wrong. We thought the cash flow was going to be completely different. There were things that we didn't take into account, and we played the first 6 months. We played accounts payable roulette. I was daily assessing where we were at from a cash standpoint, who had to be paid so it didn't affect our credit rating, which meant that carriers wouldn't work with us, like who we could maybe push off a little bit. Who was the small guy that we absolutely didn't want to go under because we didn't pay them. If you're trying and you're intentional and you're honest about how things are going and you are willing to learn, whether it's through other people or through mistakes, I think that's really important. Next time I acquire a business, I'm going to call in some extra help and some extra eyes. That's what I know.
I know exactly what you mean. Transport Express handles everything from cold chain to military HHG to multi stop projects. Which area of the business is most challenging and why is that?
Think, well, right now, there's an area that we're actually trying to kind of break into, and it's reefer LTL. So it's cold chain LTL. It's sort of there's a need out there, but it's harder to find the carriers. There's a lot of requirements around that. If you're doing a cold chain, the whole truck is yours. You're like, this is the temperature I need it at. Here's where you need it to be where. It's very clear. But, what if you're just one pallet on that truck? You have to trust that this carrier is, keeping your considerations, in mind, as well as, that everything's put together. That's one. When it comes to LTL, that is just a little bit more high touch, I feel like,
What is
from
LTL?
oh, yeah, less than truckload.
Oh, okay.
So, you have FTL, which is full truckload. So when you see, the big vans going down the road and you kind of assume that all of it's the same thing going the same place, that's FTL. And then LTL is like, you've got a pallet of forks that are coming to your restaurant or, to your venue. That doesn't take a whole truck. And you don't want to pay for a whole truck for that. So you'll add it on with, the other pallets that are going maybe 4 or 5 other places to fill up the truck so that they can maximize, their time as well. That is a little harder sometimes just because there's more variables at play. What if something breaks down? What if there's a delay at, one drop off? So then it slows down. Then you're a day late for the next drop off. I would say for my people, those are more time intensive. Um, we do have an area that is very time sensitive that we service, and that, the expectation is when we get the call, we've got 90 minutes to get a truck to that dock. And that is an incredibly quick turnaround, and they
Wow.
require teams. So we need 2 drivers because there's no stopping, right? Once they pick that up, it's going to where it's going, and those drivers are tag teaming it, and that truck is moving the whole time. I mean, those are just some of the ones that have, I feel like, extra considerations. We do have, one of my guys does strictly flatbed over dimensional large machinery. So then you've got permitting. I saw one in Arizona last year when I was there, and it was a turbine. Like, like one of the blades of those huge windmill like things.
Seen videos of how much highway those things take up when they're being transported. Yeah,
Isn't that insane? I
it
mean,
really
there
is.
was a police escort, there was a truck driving behind it. You have to certain roads you can't go down because bridges and, when you're working with overdimensional. I would say that is one of the more challenging modes that is out there, and I got a guy who can do it in his sleep, and it's amazing.
That's
It's
crazy.
amazing. Like, when you learn it, you know it, and you know who to talk to, and you know who to call, and, um, yeah.
Some guys are just built a little different.
I think we're built a little different, Andrew. I mean, do people really want to be entrepreneurs?
Well,
I
speaking of that,
resisted for a very long time.
for entrepreneurs listening who want to level up, what's one skill or habit that changed the game for you over the past decade?
Mm, reading. I mean, it's, you know, read in whichever way you can, whether it's a physical book, whether it's an audiobook, whether it's podcasts, like never stop learning. That is my biggest thing because once you stop learning and you abandon a growth mindset, you're done. You're stuck. That is it. That's your limit. So I would say that. And then the idea that I read The Compound Effect a long time ago, which was sort of, I don't know the timing of it, but it's basically like Atomic Habits, that same concept of small moves over a prolonged period of time actually create big results. And I think some of us as entrepreneurs, I mean, I definitely know it's me. I have an idea and I want it to happen yesterday. And I get really frustrated with the amount of time that it can take for my dreams to come to fruition. And one of the things I've learned very much recently is that the harder I try and push for something, the more resistance I come up against. And then the more exhausted I am and the more discouraged I am. And actually, this idea of, okay, if I have a dream, that means that it's possible for me. And knowing that and being open to receiving it and realizing that this is real, it just might not be real right now. But when I accept the fact that it's real and it's happening, I become the person and I take the steps and the actions required to make that happen. And it's not a forceful thing. It is actually a kind of an inflow, beautiful thing where you make the choices because they align with what you know is already yours.
All right, guys, Lacey's story is a reminder that great businesses are built through ownership, adaptability, and a willingness to wear every hat when needed. If you're a business owner or a leader looking to improve efficiency and build a service experience your customers can count on, check out Transport Express and see how Lacey's team delivers fast, flexible, high-touch logistics done right the first time. Thanks for tuning into the Bullpen Podcast, where local leaders share real-world strategies to take your business to the next level. See you next time. Thank you, Lacey.
Thanks, Andrew.